Okay, Norman and Never Trikes here. This is an Indian I just got in here a couple days ago. This is a 2017 Roadmaster. This one came from South Dakota. And we're going to do something a little bit special on this one. This one's going to be quite different than any other build I've done because I'm going to leave the lowers and the crash bars in place, and I'm going to sculpture the body to fit this line right here. And we're going to put a different grill on here. I'm going to actually have the name Indian laser cut or hydro cut into the grill, and we're going to backlight that. This has a little Indian chief ornaments that go on the fenders, so we're going to have those that'll light up. There's also one on the front fender, which I'm going to try to remount on the hood, and hopefully that'll work out okay. But I got about an hour into this, tore the front end apart, so I'm actually ready to start putting the frame together. I've got the master frame here. I have to build the adapter cradle, and I'll have that all done today, have it all powder coated, and then probably be starting on A-arms and that type of thing. I'm going to put some short tubes in here that'll be driving the steering stem. Once I get that done, then I'll put this all back together and we'll be good to go. But other than that, I thought I should get started on this as far as the video goes, so we can kind of take this one from start to finish. And it should be a pretty good project. It's a nice bike, and you know, it's got very few miles on it. It's kind of a different green. There's a lot of pearl in the green. It probably doesn't show up much in the video, but we're going to match that up and see how we can get this to blend and get the body style to flow. The fenders, you know, with the Indians, they have the big bonnet fenders with the swooping back part to them, and I'm going to duplicate that on both fenders, so it's going to be a lot of labor on the fenders to get them to blend and to match, and you know, that's a big goal, is to get this looking like it was built at the factory. So I will periodically be doing videos and updates on the progress. I'll probably do another video as soon as I have the frame assembly on, and probably have the wheel assemblies mounted and all that, so you can start to see the progression, and we'll see how it goes. So stay tuned to what's happening here, and I'll update as things progress. Thank you. Machine this down. And it's kind of a lengthy process. I have to take off about 20 thousandths of an inch to get these to fit. What I'll do is machine this whole thing down and get them to fit in there, and then I'll build the steering head, and then we'll do a little video on that, and the process of how I get all the steering and all that to fit together. Okay, this is the final pass here. I'm just taking off enough just to clean up the surface a little bit. And then I'll flip this around and I'll machine the other end down so it's at least shiny. The machine I'm using here is a Grizzly Model 9729. And it's a combo lathe where it's got the regular lathe part, and then it's got this mill head, which I don't use too much anymore. I used it quite a bit when I first got the lathe a few years ago, but I haven't really used the mill head much since then. But it's kind of nice because you can run both at the same time. This is kind of handy dandy. But this one also has a 15.5-inch swing, so I can run rims in here and cut down the bead landings and stuff on 15-inch rims, which I have to do occasionally. But it's really been a good machine. It's got a 6-inch chuck on this one. Some fork tubes I'm building here. And as you can see, I start out with a metal pipe, and I plug the ends. I machine out a piece of 1/4-inch steel. And this is actually a union nut. It's about 1.5 inches long. And I do one of those on each end so that I can center it in the lathe. And this is actually the end product. And you can see it's got a little shoulder on it. And this will be powder coated black. And where that goes is up here, the triple trees here. and it'll go all the way up in there, and then on the bottom, and I'll show that in a later video, it'll actually bolt to the steering sector, which runs the tie rods and that type of thing. This is part 2 on the Indian, and as you can see, I've made some progress. I actually started on this not quite a week ago. Last time I left it here, it was the front end was off, and it was basically just ready for the transition. And I got the adapter frame all done. I got the framework all finished here, and got a little green accent on the calipers there. And I just put the tires on. And you can see the brake lines are all, the plumbing is done. I actually started on some of the wiring. You can see there's a 14-inch fan in there. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the power here. And you can see the fan spins up. And that'll probably give it plenty of air to keep this machine cool, even if it's parked at a stop sign. The fan blows directly on the oil cooler and the cylinders, and we got plenty of airflow going through there. I'll have to work on the rest of the cowling to make sure I get some air scoops and things incorporated into that. It actually sits pretty good. I was a little concerned on the shocks. It's a little heavier shock. I'm using the rear shocks for a Harley Davidson Dyna, which works out really good. It's a Show A shock. And I've got the height adjustments all the way down. And it seems to sit pretty good. The bottom A-arm should be pretty much straight across, and there may be about a ½ inch high right now, but once I get all the body panels and everything on, I think she'll settle down to be about right. So I've got the terminal strip there. I'm going to put the little Indian Chief ornament on the fenders, and I'm also going to put it on the hood. So my next step here is actually the body panels. I'm going to put the fairing back on because I'm all done with that. I think last time I was talking was about the fork tubes, and as you can see, they're powder coated black, and I got them in here, and they basically bridge the triple trees together because there's no real structural integrity to the system unless those tubes are in there, because the main shaft that goes through the steering head here is it's not splined or anything, so the two triple trees can work independently, and we don't want that. So these tubes actually are the same diameter as the original tubes. I machined those down on the lathe, and I did that, showed you that on the previous video. And so that drives the shaft, which drives the tie rods. And I've got a formula on how I set that and the ratios and stuff, and I don't like to go into that because that's kind of a trade secret. So, but other than that, it did have originally a red stripe, and I painted that green to match the rest of the bike and kind of give it a little bit of green accent. I think when we get everything all done and get the paint to blend, it's going to be pretty sharp. The back tire is a 16-inch rim, so I'm going to be putting a car tire on the back. That's part of the deal here also. Okay, I'm about 5 days into this, and 5 working days that is. It's been about a week and a half, so I had a couple days where it wasn't really doing anything. But as you can see, I've got the body shell kind of roughed together here. I decided to go with a honeycomb screen here instead of the expanded diamond plate that I usually use. This kind of fits with the texture of the bike a little bit better. And I decided to remount the original Fender Indian on the hood here. This does light up, and I got 2 of them. This is a 8-inch, and there's 2 4-inch units just like this that are going to go on the fenders, and that should be pretty sharp. This has got a different texture to it. Normally this is the stock shape of the front piece, but here it bellows in, so it actually does kind of an S curve, and that fits the contour of the stock lowers. And then I added this little bit of a flare here. I'm going to put an Indian Chief head on each side. I ordered them in black and white. I'm not real sure which color is going to look the best, so I ordered one of each. The Endeavor logo is going to go up in here somewhere. I'm not going to put it on the hood. Normally we do this with the smoke flames, and I put the Endeavor logo on the front. but this one's going to be heavily Indian. So we're putting this is just a representation of where the logo is going to go in the front here. This is actually the Indian font. It's the factory Indian font. I'm going to have a piece of sheet metal with this laser cut or hydro cut into the metal, and then that's going to be affixed onto the screen here, and then the screen will be cut out in the back so that I can backlight it, so the Indian name will actually glow at night. So I have to put a lighting fixture behind that. I cut some little grooves in here on these end pieces to make this look like a feather, which kind of fits in with the whole Indian scheme. And this kind of matches the fairing up here. So I'm trying to bring that shape down to here. All this is going to be black. It's a plan. We'll see how it actually fits together when I'm done. But all this can be black. The grills are all going to be black. And this part here is going to be green. So there's going to be green in here. We may blend in some green on the sides. We may throw some black on the hood. But I want to get it all done. And then a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take colored paper and lay it out on there and try to get a little bit of a visual on how it's going to look and that kind of thing. There would be a bumper out in the front here. Normally I make it kind of angled on the ends and straight across. This one I think I'm going to do an arch because everything on this bike is kind of round. Okay, I'm talking a little bit about the fenders on this Indian. I have to make a bob fender to match, basically follow the flow like the saddlebags. You see the little slope on the back of the saddlebag, and when I get around the other side of the bike, I'll show you a fender that's pretty well complete and what our goal is here. But as you can see, I start out with just a standard trailer fender. So it's I believe this is 16 gauge steel. I've got some slots cut in the back here, so I can bend that to make that special design that the Indian has. And the mounting is pretty standard. It's a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch tubing that I use, square tubing, and it's welded on the outside edge and into the fender itself. On these, the fenders are really going to be quite heavy. So there's some extra reinforcement. Over here I've got one that's rough together. You can see that the dimensioning on the braces there has been increased, especially on the back one there. So that's going to give it a little more structural integrity. I've got a little lip here. That's going to be painted silver. The rest of the fender would be black. And then I get around here, you can see the design that I have incorporated. And the black material you'll see, that's all panel bond adhesive. Everything is spot welded, and then I use adhesive to secure everything in place, including the joints here that I had cut before. You can see how the fender has been reshaped. And rather than weld those, which is time consuming, and it's difficult to get everything to lay flat, and it also causes a lot of warping. So I use a panel bond adhesive, which is structurally very strong. And this piece here that you see is, it extends up into this lip, and that's all held in place with adhesive and a couple spot welds. And this will all be trimmed out. This edge will be all trimmed out with the rubber edging. And this part here will be painted probably green. Then we'll have a silver band here and then black on the top. And if you can see the original fender, that's the scheme we're going to try to adhere to, which is the green, the silver, and the black. And there might be actually on the top edge here, I think I'm going to put a 1/8 inch silver stripe to match what's back here. So, you know, the whole goal here is to get it all to blend. And you can see there's a little extra design on the cowling there. And I've got the Indian chief head, and there'll be a couple little Indian chief heads that go on each fender, and it should really tie everything together pretty well. I've got about 6 hours in this fender, so it actually went pretty good. You know, I allocated a complete day, but I've done a couple of these in the past, so I'm kind of getting to the point where I can freehand them in pretty good. And it basically is freehand. This is all it's all done pretty much by the minute. You kind of come up with the design as you're building it. And the other fender over there is probably going to take me 3 hours, I suppose, to finish that one. So I'll kind of do a couple extra segments here with the steps as I go along with the other fender, just to kind of fill you in. So anyway, that's the way she's coming together. Let me get back here, we can get a better look at everything. And it's starting to blend. I'll have to get the fenders done, and I'm going to focus on that front grille and see if I can get that all tied together real nicely. So anyway, we'll continue in a little bit. Okay, you can see I've got some extra bracing here, and I added this strap on the outside edge here to give it some heft and some extra bracing on the fender edge. And what you see in there is just a couple pieces of scrap I'll put in there as a filler, and I'll weld over. All of this will be covered with weld both sides, and I'll grind it smooth, and that way it'll have a nice appealing look and be structurally strong. And see if you can see on the inside here how I weld actually not only on the edge of the fender but also midway, which spreads the load over, and it prevents the edge of the fender from cracking. So what you want to do is not only achieve a look, but like everything else on a trike or anything you build, it has to be structurally sound. And you know, that's the goal here. So I'm going to go ahead and weld this up, get them all ground off and polished up, and then we're going to start doing some bending and some trim work. And I'll continue with the video at that point. Okay, you can see I got the fender pretty much rough together. I've got the edge on here. It's all bent and tack welded in. And it normally sticks in like this, and I grind that off flush, because you don't want this bridge here, because that'll catch dirt and debris and end up being a rust issue. So you can see it widens the fender out by almost 3/4 of an inch. And that's really the main purpose for this extra deal, is to widen it. And then what I do for this edge is I cut a piece of 1-inch strap, and then I bend a 90 in it like this, and then I use a shrinker and a stretcher. And I've got one over here. And this one here is the stretcher, and I actually need the shrinker for this part. Same tool does the opposite thing. And you notice I got STR on that one to mean stretch. And so what I'll do with this one is you just walk it around here, and I don't put much pressure on here at all. I just kind of bounce the tool. If I wanted to, I could put a pretty good sized bend in this, but I just want a natural little arc. And there you go. So I'm going to check to see if it'll fit. And I got to go a little bit more. And this is all kind of by guess. When you're doing custom stuff like this, there's no real drawings, and a lot of times there's no actual plan, except for what you visualize it should look like. And then you kind of adapt as you go along. Okay. So that's really all it took on that. I'm going to zoom back over here and get focused. And as you can see, it'll fit there just like that. I'll tack that, I'll trim this edge off, and then I'm going to mount the fender in place. And then this skirt, which I basically copied off the other one, that's going to sit in here to form the valance for the fender. Now this I won't actually put in place until the fender is mounted. What I'll do is I'll put some panel adhesive on this edge, push it up in there, and then I'll stick some, I've been using hammer handles. I just slide a hammer handle in here, and what that'll do is it'll force this up, but also force it to bend out like that. And that's what I really need to get a little extra clearance on the wheel. And then I'll leave it sit overnight, and the adhesive usually hardens in about 8 hours, and I'll leave that get good and hard. and then I'll finish sand the whole thing, and we'll end up with a fender that can go to the paint shop. Okay, I'm going to do a little walk around here, seeing as both fenders now are all set. This one I just kind of rough sanded it. I'm going to let my my painter finish this up. If I do too much on it, then I just make it worse for him. So he's going to go ahead and take care of the detail on this, get it all painted for me. And this fender here, I just put the adhesive in there. And as you can see, I've got the skirt and everything on this one. And the glue is just going to have to sit there and dry. I've got a hammer in there and a screwdriver. And what that does is it actually pulls it away. So it forms a space there between the tire. And when I pull the tools out of there, it'll go back a little bit, but it basically stay billowed out a little bit. And if I have to, I can bend this edge back in a little bit and get it to where it conforms nicely. And we'll leave that sit overnight now. I'm pretty much done for the day, so I'm just going to leave it sit here. Okay, the material I use is a 3M product. It comes in a small gun. I use this smaller one because I normally use one full tube. On this bike, I'm actually going to use about 3. This is 38315 is the number on this material. And I can also get it, I think this is 45 milliliter. I think they measured that in milliliter. And the bigger gun takes 200, so it's quite a bit bigger and not much more cost effective. And I should have probably used the large tubes on this, but anyway, that's what I use. It's almost like an epoxy material. It mixes in the end here. As the material goes through the end, it goes through like 40 different mixing chambers, and the two mix together just like a standard epoxy. One little trick with this is I only use like a little bit at a time, and then it sits, and you know, the material will harden in the tip, and then you have to throw the tip away. And they only send you one tip. But a trick is you take the tip off, you use a nail to push the interior part out of it, and you throw it in a jar of lacquer thinner and shake it up and leave it sit for about a half an hour, and then shake it some more. And that's usually enough to dissolve all the solvent in there, and then put it back together, and I stick it back on the gun. And that way I can use the same tip for at least 4 or 5 applications. The trick though is also don't leave it sit in the lacquer thinner overnight, because the plastic will swell and you won't get the pieces back together. So just a little tip there to save you some trouble if you use this material. But anyway, this guy's gonna sit tonight, and then tomorrow I'm gonna get it all prepped and probably do one final video before it goes out to the painter. Okay, this is going to be the last video before this unit goes to paint. I've got everything kind of roughed in. I did some finished sanding on it, kind of figured out the paint layout. And as you can see, I have the little Indians, the little Indian chiefs on the fenders. And the placement of those was kind of tricky because I tried to get them where they would blend in the best. And where they are now, the slope of the Indian feathers seems to kind of follow the lines of the fender itself. So that's what I went with. They're 6 inches back from the nose. The other one is 2 inches back, and that seemed to be a pretty good placement for that one. These will all light up. So I think we're going to put perimeter edge lighting underneath the hood edge here, which will be amber lighting, and then there'll be lighting behind the Indian plate once I get the plates back. I'm having 4 plates made because this is actually a built-up deal. There's a mesh screen, and you can see in here there's an air gap. So it's actually 2 pieces. So I can take this grill apart and change it and do different things with the Indian logo once I get that here. And once I settle on something that looks appealing, then that's what we're going to go with. Right now, the way I have it planned is the whole front of the bike is going to be black. The hood is going to be black. The cap up there will be black. And you can see where I have it designated here as far as what's green and what's black. And we're going to see how that looks with kind of a green panel in there. I don't want to, overwhelm the whole thing with too much color. So we're going to stay kind of at a basic panel design. I've got my little Indian chief heads there, which are just taped in place. Those are actually a decal, and the ones I have showing there are black, but we're going to end up putting white ones there because that part of the hood will be black. And then my Endeavor Custom, those signs will go up. I'll have one on each side, so they'll kind of be tucked up under the fairing. I don't want to be too intrusive with the logoing, but yeah, it's coming together pretty good. So that's what she looks like. And right now, I'm going to tear the whole thing down, pull all the fenders, panels, everything, and weatherproof everything. And inside of all these panels will be truck bed liner. And tomorrow, this all goes to the painter, and hopefully by mid next week, I'll have this thing all together, finished, and ready for a test drive now that spring is here. And in this part of the country, the difference between winter and spring is it stops snowing and just starts raining. So we're going to go for that. So anyway, that'll be it until I get her all put together, and then we'll do a little walk around when it's a complete finished product. Okay, well, this will be the last video on the Roadmaster. We've got her all done. As you can see, there's a little fanciness involved in this one. We ended up repainting the entire bike. We couldn't get a match on the paint. We couldn't get color right, couldn't match it. Nobody seemed to be able to come up with a formula. And we could get it really, really close, but it wasn't an exact match. So what we did is I just repainted everything. And so this thing's got a fresh coat of paint on it. As you can see, the fenders, added the valance to the fenders and an extra little chrome strip there. We've got the Indian heads. These actually light up. And got a little Indian logo there on the top cover. And this Indian logo, this light here actually was the original one on the fender. And I had a hydro cut Indian for the grill here. And the grill's actually, I don't know if you can see it real good, but it's actually a shine black. And then I cut some grooves in it to make it look like feathers on the end there. And this one was kind of different because I left the lowers in place and kind of tucked the body panels behind it. So it really blends together pretty nice. I do have a 14-inch fan in there for extra cooling and that kind of thing. We've got to get the windshield on here, but he's got the windshield because we had to ship it without the windshield. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the lights on here. So you can see there's perimeter lights underneath the hood. The little Indian guys, they light right up. The one on the hood's pretty bright. And then the Indian right there also lights up. I built a little light box with some reflective tape in it so that the Indian would really show up at night. And we actually got exclusive rights from Polaris to use that logo. And that is the Polaris font, or the Indian font. It's called Indian 2. And I had to buy the font. That was no big deal. But anyway, the paint job and everything came out really good. And the only thing I got left on this is a test drive. And once that's done, probably about midweek or end week, I'm going to run this over to Sioux Falls, and he's going to meet me there and take her off my hands. And this one should be on display at the Sturgis Indian dealer during Sturgis week, I hope, because it'll be a real show stopper, I think. But anyway, it turned out really, really good. And on the back, I put a brand new car tire on the back. I believe that's a Michelin. And I use Continentals on the front. It's 160, 60, 15, 165, 60, 15. And we picked out some nice 14-spoke black rims, and they look really good too. So the whole thing turned out pretty sharp. Pretty proud of this guy. We put a lot of, actually put about 2 extra weeks of work in it. Spent a lot of extra money on paint and stuff, but I really wanted to get an Indian done, so we did a little sacrifice on this one just to say we got the only Indian reverse trike in the world, which is a pretty good deal, especially seeing as it's going to be on display. So anyway, this one will be posted on the website, and this will be a feature bike until I get the next couple done or something. But pretty proud of this one.